Did you know that a lot of digestive issues are caused by a potential toxin that's in all of the quote healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for the longest time? Warning signs include weight gain and fatigue, digestive discomfort and stiff joints, even skin problems. Well, Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, explains these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. He says the damage is probably caused by these health foods and it's far from normal. The good news is you can easily help fix the problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can go find this yourself at gutcleanseprotocol.com/inspired. Because after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public, free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/inspired or click on the link in the video description below.
At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge. We're going to send all the federal resources they need as we respond to this emergency. And I mean all the federal resources. And we're going to rebuild that port together. Everything so far indicates that this was a terrible accident.
I'm talking to people who are on the inside, some who are on active duty, some who are retired, and everyone, literally from critical infrastructure in Department of Homeland Security to the intelligence agencies, they know there's no other, this is a cyber attack on a critical infrastructure corridor for the United States. Everything that you need for your economy to move has literally just been shut down for 4 to 5 years.
New fallout for Sean Diddy Combs in the wake of Monday's raids. Federal investigators now confirm agents seized electronics from the rapper's homes in California and Florida. Combs' plane flew from California to Antigua in the Caribbean, but Combs was apparently not on board. Sources say the raids are connected to a criminal investigation into sex trafficking allegations against Combs. He's also named in several civil lawsuits, including from music producer Rodney Jones, who accused Combs of sexual assault and engaging in a, quote, widespread and dangerous criminal sex trafficking organization. Combs denies the allegations. His lawyer calls the raids a gross overuse of military-level force, adding this is nothing more than a witch hunt.
Who is to benefit? This crime can only be a link in a chain of attempts by those who are at war with our country since 2014.
Travis County is preparing for a wave of visitors by issuing a declaration of local disaster.
Well, Kendall County is the latest to issue a disaster declaration ahead of next month's eclipse. Kerr County has also made a disaster declaration.
A disaster declaration.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signing an executive order to assure state agencies will be prepared.
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired conversation and live stream combined today. It is Friday, February 29th, 2024. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're whole, we're free. And in many ways, we are winning, my friends. We are experiencing unprecedented times, really. And these are not just my words. I was on a call with today's guest yesterday, and he said, from whichever way you look at it, this just doesn't make any sense. And he also says we need to prepare. So please welcome with me our dear friend, a brilliant military strategist. He was in the Air Force for a very long time and is now a civilian out there lending his expertise everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us again. Retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, and happy Easter and happy Good Friday. And one little show note, it's actually March 29th, but I am thrilled to be with you today. And
General, I either get the day or the month wrong, so I really appreciate you. Thank you.
That's okay. But it still remains the same. We need to prepare. This is the outside environment is absolutely nuts.
General, happy Easter to you and your family. Happy Good Friday. Let's dive right into it. You are a military strategist, and as a strategist, you need to find and analyze patterns in order to define a paradigm, right? So let's look at some of the patterns that are emerging and that have been emerging over the last few days. Let's maybe start with what happened in Baltimore. What's your take on this situation?
Yeah, first off, it's a tragedy. This is really horrible. And first for the dead on the bridge, the people who lost their lives, we think of them first, and then we start to think about effects on us. I can't think of a better picture to paint, something more emblematic of just how fragile United States infrastructure has become. In this case, transportation infrastructure, but you can extend that out to our cyber infrastructure, our power grid infrastructure, our water. The way that we live our lives is hanging by a thread. And we saw that play out where one ship takes out a bridge. We'll talk about how that comes about in a little bit. But you've got incredible ships, some of our very most capable Navy Sea Lift ships sitting in that harbor stuck now. You've got hazardous materials that can't move the way they normally move, coal and liquid natural gas exports that won't find their markets. And then you've got this incompetent Secretary of Transportation who has rerouted dollars out of basic transportation needs for the nation and reprogrammed them into whether or not bridges are racist, whether or not his workforce is qualified in the Marxist DEI construct. And an example of that, it's not causal to this accident, I believe, but an example of that is the two tugboats that were escorting that ship out of its berth departed as soon as it got into the shipping channel, did not stick with it coming through the bridge. Had they been able to do that, this accident would not have occurred even with the hard over rudder. But they have been hauling back on those services just to stay within their budgetary guidelines, because the Secretary of Transportation, the one who presided all over that East Palestine railway disaster, which still has not been answered for, has made choices that have zero to do with his job.
General, I'm for smaller vessels. I'm a certified captain. I've told you this. For smaller vessels, up to 120 feet, I could do commercial. But what I noticed about this maneuver is that it kind of reminds me, you're a pilot. It kind of reminds me of the 9/11 stories and how you could pilot a plane into the Pentagon like that, which is a near impossibility, but that's for another day. This particular thing looked so unreal to me, and it would have been so hard to make that happen by accident. What do you think really happened, and are we absolutely clear that this is or was an attack?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this tack. The people that I've talked to, you had a good little clip of Lara Logan, who this woman's got great sources. I will say that for her. And maybe we've even talked to some of the same people. But I've been in the logistics business in the military for quite some time. I know a lot of sea captains. I know a lot of folks who drive the big ships, and I've done quite a bit of research when this first happened. I don't find the administration's conclusions, which were reached less than 4 hours in the middle of the night after the accident, to be consistent with what we see before our very eyes. And I think that the assertions being made in several pockets of experts saying that this was a cyber strike and that the ship controls were taken away from the captain and the captain couldn't get to manual steering in time. You cannot shift to a manual steering system within 200 yards of an obstacle. The fact that the ship didn't just clobber the bridge, it went for a pylon, which assures us that the bridge is going to go. I think that the administration is really in an unbelievable place. There are so many people that don't want to come out and say, look, we challenge you, we don't believe what you said, because they're so worried about being branded as a conspiracy theorist. And I'm just going to say that, well, you can keep playing it safe that way, but I don't know how many more events like this have to happen in our nation before it really doesn't matter what anybody postulates or not. It'll be so obvious to us that we're being eaten out from the inside with an administration presiding over it.
It's exactly like you just said. You know, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it usually is a duck.
Right.
And we've just seen too many events over the last years that are always inexplicable accidents. We've seen hundreds of fires in major food production, meat production facilities. We've seen train wrecks and disasters. And of course, there are smaller disruptions, but significant ones to the supply chain, which causes my friend down, a captain, a fishing boat captain. He goes out and takes people on charters, and he's waiting on a standard 250 horsepower 4-stroke outboard engine. This is like the most standard thing that you could possibly think of. He's waiting for a new engine for a year and a half, which shows us what is really happening here. Just like all other industries are waiting for parts and waiting for whatnot. What is really, is this from within? Do we have complicit elements within the nation? What's going on, and who do you think is behind this attack?
Well, let's look at the things that we can see. So quite visually, we can see millions coming across our southern borders, flooding in. That's against the law. But that means in order to achieve that you cannot achieve that state that we can see visually happening without thousands of government employees betraying their oath of office to the Constitution of the United States and preferring to take the strong guidance of their leaders in this administration to do exactly what they're doing. But I would say to just a CBP guy on the watch on the border, it's like if the administration told you to go rob a bank, or you're going to lose your job, are you going to do that too? But let's take that a step further. If we can see those things on the outside, well, then why are we supposed to believe that? But behind the things that we can't see, everything is on the up and up. Meaning, how much money have we spent on things that have zero to do with the mission and purpose that those agencies are chartered to give? So an examination of the budgets and how much is spent on DEI, how much is spent on reprogramming and re-educating this workforce, weeding out the experienced people in this workforce and hiring incompetence, and then simply covering up that nothing to see here. So a case in point, we can get back to the ship. Okay, let's take the government at their word. You got crystal clear knowledge in those 6 hours in the middle of the night, which I've never seen a government agency move so fast ever through an investigation.
Me neither, General. Me neither.
In my life. But let's say you were able to pull that off, and it was just obvious to you that this was just an accident. And then you make the magical statement, and the government is going to pay for this whole thing.
Why didn't they say that in East Palestine? What's the difference?
Let's even drag it further than that. The government's not paying for East Palestine. The government's didn't pay for the World Trade Center to be rebuilt. The government didn't pay for those things. So here's how it turns out. When you crash a ship is insured by a big one like an AIG, a Chubb, or a Lloyd's of London. And when that ship wrecks, the first thing the insurers have the right to do is declare a crime scene and go investigate everything. But if the government says, nope, we're going to pay for the whole thing, guess what? The insurance companies are now off the hook and there'll be no investigation. And then you could say, well, okay, General Holt, that's crazy. Get yourself a tinfoil hat and we don't want to hear from you anymore. All right. Well, before you tune me out, one more thing. The NTSB came back immediately saying not only did we find the black box, but we know for sure that the data voice recorder was blacked out and blanked out and undiscernible in those last 2 minutes before impact on the pylon that took out the entire bridge. I'm sorry, I'm a reasonable person, and so I'm not a buyer of these just nonsensical facts that have come down. We can all argue about who did it, but I'm fairly confident that the folks that I've talked to who are convinced that this is a cyber hit on our infrastructure and our transportation, and then you can get into the motivations. I think we're looking at some foreign actors, and I'll just put it this way. I think if you did not have that music hall hit in Moscow, I think the dolly and the bridge are still floating today. That's speculation on my part, but that's where I think it is.
I think that's where kind of the conversation is leading. We want to go from observing all the patterns and see if we can find a paradigm here that tells us what's really going on. There's one more thing with this bridge thing. It just slipped my mind right now. Oh no, actually there is. It's interesting. Symbology always plays a role. We know this. Whoever is behind certain attacks, you always find a symbolical pattern.
Right.
So this is the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Francis Scott Key is a very significant figure in American history.
Right.
Significant lawyer, but more significantly, the author of the Star Spangled Banner. What you make of that?
Yeah. So if you're going to pick a target, what an elegant target to pick if you're trying to send a message to the United States and Washington, D.C., that we've got a ton of ways to carve you up. And so from a threatening message perspective, taking out the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore right next to our nation's capital should send a pretty stark message. The fact that you have knocked out a large portion, I think 10% of our sea lift capability, is significant. So yeah, the symbology is there. So then you could get to this. You had 5 days prior to the bridge hit, you had, I think 5 or 4, you had Vladimir Putin make a press conference, and he said, I blame for the terror hit in Moscow. I blame Ukraine, the United States, and the UK. Okay. Well, so he blames us. That's dangerous. What we don't see is the State Department do anything about that threat. We don't see the president call and offer sympathy and condolences as normal heads of state would for that terror threat, that act. In fact, we hear silence. Now, I have not concluded, I want to be very clear about that the Russians are responsible for the Francis Bridge going down. But if there was something nefarious, they would have to be in the list of suspects based on what Vladimir Putin said alone. But there's a bigger connotation here. If the Russians were able to work an immediate time-sensitive target that they were monitoring and had the capability, whether alone or with another actor like China's Fault Typhoon Group or whatever, and that they could take that action that fast, just days after what happened in Moscow, and then the Russians blaming us, well, then militarily, that would have to mean that they're monitoring all kinds of targets all across our country, and that they have them ready, and they look at bespoke targets to go get. So, you would say, well,
okay. I just got to ask you, because you brought that up, General. If this was a military operation,
yeah,
against a legitimate foreign target, how long would a regular preparation take in order to pull that off?
If you had no planning and no designs on that country, meaning you were not in a state of war, there was nothing going on, then you were attacked by the country, and now you're going to attack them back, that planning can take months. It just depends on what your course of action is going to do. So I guess what I'm saying, and that we've got to be careful about, and I'm only saying this is a possibility, is that if the Russians did this as what they perceive to be the answer to what happened in Moscow, then it means that the months lead time in planning had already existed, that they are then monitoring, and we do believe that they are, that they're monitoring our infrastructure. They're monitoring several different ways to get at us in what we call a 5th generational warfare plan, which would be, I will not hit you with armed forces or soldiers or bombs. I'm going to hit you with cyber, with attacking your grid, information shaping operations, screwing around with your elections. That's what 5th gen warfare is. It's quite effective, and we see it happening all over the world. We see it happening in our own country right now. And so this is a big one, but it's also a big wake-up call to say, hey, look, if you stare at the rearview mirror long enough, you're going to hit something. So you got to back that up, and you got to go, well, what else is vulnerable? And then when we take a look at our vulnerabilities in transportation, water, grid, our municipalities, and then millions of fighting age men walking around amongst us from all the different groups, oh, we got a problem. And so we're looking at a national security team that has failed us for 3 straight years. They don't even have one win. So if that's the case, then what we have to do as we the people is we've got to be resilient in our own communities. We've got to take care of ourselves at the local level. And we've got to continually, like a resounding drumbeat, melt the switchboard in DC to say we disapprove of this. And we disapprove of these narratives that keep getting implausibly shoved up our noses that we don't believe. And the whole point is when they come out 4 hours later and say, oh, this was an accident. Okay. I'm sorry, you're not sitting on a mountain of credibility from Kabul to now to get to that place. I mean, in the case of the terror hit on Moscow, and I'm not suggesting the United States did anything about this, but it sure seems fishy to me that they hadn't even arrested anybody yet in that bombing, and yet there's our embassy out there saying, "Oh, this is ISIS." It's like, how do you know? They haven't. Don't they have to arrest somebody and then you maybe could take a stab at it? And what we're doing is we're getting very defensive on that very quickly, because the embassy is perpetually messaging the Russians over and over and over again, saying it wasn't Ukraine, it wasn't Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin is just using that all to his advantage. So we could be lily white on all of this stuff, and I hope we are, but that doesn't mean that Putin's not going to make this to his advantage to the best. And what he decides he's going to do, regardless of what the truth is what we better be prepared for back here at home.
And I want to get to that. He made some very interesting statements over the last few days. Very, very interesting, bold, and sort of clear. But I want to conclude the domestic thing here to a certain extent, especially with regards to the bridge and the ship fiasco. We had Monday, after rumors and months and weeks of rumors, we had these raids on P. Diddy's, Sean Combs, residences. They still haven't come out and said they arrested him. Actually, that's not happened. That never been confirmed. However, the allegations are sex trafficking, right? And this is, and we all know what that means. That's not just one guy. That means there's a system, right?
Yeah. And
then a few hours later, in early morning hours, we have the ship fiasco, which takes over the news cycle completely, right?
Sure.
So I have to go and say, well, it's a coincidence that we have these huge events, and this one event implicates a lot of high-level people. We already saw that, right? Including someone like Prince Harry was at least named in the charges. So could there be any connection? Let me put it this way, especially since it's a cargo ship and we know certain things about cargo ships and trafficking routes and whatnot.
No, that's exactly right. I think at this point in time, it would just be speculative to say that those things line up together. But could be other things lining up as well. I think Treasury made some sort of announcement on central bank digital currency on the same day. And so you could see an event like this, and then all of a sudden, the things that the government doesn't want you to really know about, they suddenly just activate them and shove them in. So that's just a case of, hey, look, we got a really bad thing happening over here. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Let's go ahead and take all this other stuff that won't make the news. Go back to the Epstein release where we got excited about some transparency there. It turned out to be not that much, but it ate up the news cycle for 24 straight hours. And all we heard on the news was the Epstein stuff. Well, what was reported that day by the Daily Telegraph at the exact same time was that there were identified 2 brothels, one in Washington, D.C. and one in Boston, that had links to North Korea, Iran, and I think Russia. It's been a while since I read the story, but it was all out there saying that their sole purpose and goal was to compromise American scientists and academics up in Boston and politicians and staffers in the D.C. area. And yet that was it. That was a candle that was blown out the second it hit the news, because the Epstein stuff was everywhere, and we really didn't get anything that we didn't even know. Now we're here with the Diddy Combs thing, and I think he escaped in his private jet to Cape Verde, if I'm not wrong. He's trying to avoid extradition.
Supposedly he was not on a jet, but that's mainstream media. So I'll take that with a grain of salt.
Wherever he is and whatever it is, we see the same pattern, which is, it involves sex, trafficking, and powerful people. So we're going to have no transparency here, and that's the bad part. If you get to the ship, let's say that this is again a hypothetical. I'm not asserting that this is what happened, but it looks to motivations. Let's say that our government knew that Russia and China had a cyber hit on this ship and it took out the bridge. Let's say they knew that. Wouldn't they then be motivated to make that whole thing go away and then go snuff out any investigation? Because I don't really think that this national security team wants to deal with the obvious if they had incontrovertible evidence that we were hit by those countries, because then that would cause them to have to take actions and decisions that the country would expect of them. So let's say Russia committed an act of war against us. Okay, well, then we expect you to stand up and protect the United States. But if you just ignore it and move on, nothing to see here, you can avoid that, which worries me, because if that did occur in this case, and I say if that did occur, then you can expect that Russia is going to do something else to get the attention of the American people.
Let's stay on Russia before we go into the last big subject of today, which is the eclipse. There's more around that subject, and it's every day now more connections that are just breathtaking. But let's say a little bit on recent statements made by Putin that we discussed on the phone yesterday that are sort of surprising. Can you allude to that a little bit and what you make of it?
Yeah. So on the eclipse, the guidance up until this year for an eclipse has always been, don't look at the sun, you'll get hurt. Okay, that's the big emergency. There it is. Don't look at the sun. Use a little box, cut a slit in it, look at the ground, and yeehaw, you've seen an eclipse. That has changed. The new guidance is you've got over 20 counties across, 6-7 states that are declaring states of emergency in advance. You've got guard deployments. You've got special forces being deployed, being told that they're to be ready in case of massive comm outages because of potential solar flares. Solar flares happen every single day. And then you've got, I saw that notice, I think I shared it with you, where Texas said, if you've got a heavy rig or a big truck or something, it's not going to be allowed to be on the road during the eclipse timeframe, because they needed to have zero congestion on the roads if the guard needed to do their job. Are you kidding me? That was for like 40 counties in Texas. So we've gone from that to the hysteria of this, and I'm going, well, something is up, and we can't know if it's anything at all. Maybe it's, who knows? But what I can tell you is this, is there is intelligence that our government is holding, apparently down to the state level, that's not being shared with us, because we know that this is nonsense. This is not what you do in an eclipse. And if that's the case, we would like to know why. And we have a right to know why. And that's the troubling thing. So what do we do about it? I am advising folks, look, it may be a nothing burger. Like all eclipses are nothing burgers. Why? But I think because of this hysteria that the government is creating and the state governments are creating, I think people would do well to avoid travel on the 8th through the 10th. I think people should stay home with water and power and generators and all this stuff, because if they're warning us about it, what does that mean? Or is it just some big test for something in the future and getting people conditioned for some greater peril that we face? I don't know, John, but I know that when the government does stuff that is completely out of the realm of logic, then, and they won't tell us why, then you should raise your eyebrows appropriately. It's not a conspiratorial idea to just go ahead and load up on some food and make sure you can be safe with your family where you live.
And you're not just saying this as a, as a husband, a father, a family man. You're saying this as a, you were in the military for a very long time, complex war zone situations, rebuilding strategy, you name it. So you're looking at this as a military strategist and going, this just doesn't make any sense.
No.
And I did, General, I went back and I wanted to make sure that I'm not missing something. So I went back to 2017 and I was searching news articles. I was searching government websites, and I was just looking for emergency declarations, disaster preparedness, state of emergency, and I couldn't find it.
Right. I'm sorry you had to go through all that work.
I didn't find it. And I was like, well, are you telling me that this eclipse is so different from all the previous ones, and now all this? So there's something is brewing, but we don't know what it is, and that's the truth. But General, there's more to that. NASA, it's a very questionable organization in the public's eye today, has announced they're going to shoot up rockets, and CERN, our favorite scientists from Switzerland, have declared that they're going to fire up the collider, the Hadron Collider. And let me show you this too. On April 8 of all days, and also they said they discovered a 4D phantom in the superproton synchrotron. And let me put on my glasses so I can read this to you. It says, according to scientists at CERN, a mysterious entity was detected inside their particle collider. Physicists claim they have captured and calculated the characteristics of a ghost-like structure, an invisible entity that can alter the path of particles. What the hell, General? What's going on here?
Well, it certainly means that Sting was a prophet when the Police came out with that song "Ghost in the Machine." It's laughable. It is really laughable. And so I don't know what they're doing with their magic machine in CERN. But I can tell you that these folks who run these operations, they run these predictive programming drills to hit the psychology of the United States. And it gets me to loop right back to this thing that I wish Americans would get more into, which is understanding what 5th generation warfare really is. You are naive if you think you're not the target of a psyop, or what we call psychological operations. You're very naive if you think that the mainstream media isn't engaging in shaping how you think. And don't just hold TikTok accountable, go to all social media. If you think that there's not shaping operations going in there so that your emotions are being toyed with, and your belief patterns are being toyed with, and certain groups who have the truth and are doing the actual research are being castigated as the greatest threat to society, and that these are the tinfoil hat people. If you want to get clear on things, go ahead and read the book 1984, and then go to a 1999 book written by 2 Chinese colonels called Unrestricted Warfare. You can get it for free online. And that was a seminal document. I remember in 1999, I read it when it was only out for a week. And it talks about how, in a 5th generation warfare sense, without firing a shot, China could defeat the United States. And you'll be familiar with the book because you'll go through a lot of the pages and you'll see a lot of the tactics that we see playing out before us. So whether it's CERN, whether it's, I'm going to warn you about climate change, I'm going to roll you around with central bank digital currency, I'm going to tell you that your freedom of speech is a danger to society, I'm going to give Second Amendment rights to illegals, but I'm going to red flag law all the veterans who serve the country honorably and take away their weapons. If they're just going to keep bombarding and see what sticks to the wall, and that way on a day when something shocking happens, like, oh, I don't know, one of our bridges that has stood since 1977 gets plowed, and our supply chains get hit real hard, that it's not a shock. We're totally ready for that. If this event had happened, I don't know, 10 years ago, this thing would still be in the news. And right now, there's only enough cycle time in the news for the bridge for 24 hours and on to the next crazy thing.
Because there are too many to pick from, which is actually what I wanted to get at, is when you observe these patterns and when they become so frequent and so fast paced, then you can't pay attention to everything as one person. So you kind of have to go, what is the paradigm here? What period are we in? We've been talking about this great awakening from a perspective of the people, right? I mean, the people, the common people that make up the nations of the earth are undergoing a great awakening spiritually and in all other aspects of life, which is the most beautiful thing, by the way. But then there's also this other paradigm that we're trying to define, this war, like you say, fifth generation, but what are we really looking at? Because it's definitely not your class, it's not nation against nation, right? The people of America have no beef with the people of Russia and vice versa.
That's exactly right.
So what's this paradigm, and how, in the best way, what could people actually do to not just accelerate this, but to actually end this? Because it's madness, right? And at some point we have to end it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's some good news. We've gone through the gloom and doom part of the podcast. Let's go to some good news, because I think this is going to resolve in a really nice way, but not before we have some very tough days. They are going to want, and when I say they, I'm going to go right to the top of the ladder, to the folks who crave and want the control and the power. And this is your one world government kids over at the World Economic Forum. These are the people who own the central banks. They want central bank digital currency. They don't want you with rights. And quite honestly, they dream about having 7.5 billion less of us on the planet. So remember that the next time you trust one of their drug companies to sell you a medicine. But it's them, the CCP. These are the people who are Marxists, neo-Marxists. They want this, and they have carefully constructed an overly complicated plan that seems to be showing signs of cracking. And if, to use the analogy of the Wizard of Oz, we can start to see behind the curtain to the great Oz right now. So they want to keep us divided against each other with their divide everybody up woke culture, so that we can keep them all at each other's throats while we impose lots of mass changes on them. Okay, but here's how this is going to roll out. They can't do that for much longer, because the stakes and the events happening are getting so lethal. So let's take this down a hypothetical path, but a plausible one. The UN cuts off the money to the illegals in Europe and the United States. Then the illegals react harshly and go out and decide they're going to steal and riot and create violence as a result of having zero and not having any constructive ability to contribute to those societies. Then that provides the perfect camouflage for the actual terror groups that are cells to be activated in these areas. Then a third wave of state actors like PLA or People's Liberation Army or Russian or Iranian, North Korean operatives can go about getting at target sets that are more complicated, like the fifth generation ones we've been talking about. At some point, as we go down that scary monster path, or some path like it, this is what's going to happen. I don't care if you're the most ardent believer of everything that MSNBC is selling tonight. You will be mollified and see things that cause you to rethink that position. And so what I think we're going to see in the coming months is something that has us unifying. That's something that, whether you're red, you're blue, you're communist, you're conservative, you're going to be scared straight into, holy cow, we're all in trouble. So when you have a terrorist going after people, they actually won't sort you out by your political ideology. They'll just whack your head off just the same. And we're going to see some stuff in the country, I believe. I could be wrong, of course, but I believe that we have no reverse gear on what's already in the country and about to go. And so over the summer, maybe perhaps certainly in advance of the election, because I think ultimately in the United States, that's what this is about. But I think there's going to be a great unifier for the people, and that your petty differences of, well, that person's conservative, I don't want to be around them, or that person's a liberal, I don't want to be around them. No, you both need food, you both need shelter, you both need a safe place for your kids to play, and you need it sustainably. And I think that's what will bring people together in a really good way. And then I think we do other good things along the way, like start to hold all these people accountable, because if we don't do that, they'll never go away and they'll just keep attacking us.
I mean, you know, we sometimes use different terminology, but we very much see the same thing, General, from just our human standpoint. And there's one thing that I want to say to our audience, and that's the guidance that when our kids were growing up, sort of the mass shootings really, you know, started picking up, and
Right.
and there were discussions in, you know, in schools and everywhere, what to do and how to do, and go in the corner and hold the book up and this nonsense. And we had a bigger discussion that we kept encouraging our children to use their intuition, right?
Yeah.
When there are times where there's more instability, then you have intuition to tell you today's a good day to go out, and tomorrow maybe better to stay at home. You know what I mean?
Right.
You might have planned to go out in a busy public place, but you feel something's off. And
Right.
I encourage everyone to trust that, one, and two, listen to the general. Honestly, when it comes to the very basic things, people always tell us it costs so much money to prepare and they can't do it. But if you have a bag of rice, if you have you know, a few gallons of water, if you have some basic necessities in place, I mean, you sail through at least days without worrying, right? So there's something that everybody can do. And in general, maybe you could just, the very necessities that you think people should have in place, what is that?
Yeah. So first off, your number one asset in any bad situation is your community, your neighborhood. Get to know your neighbors in your community. Everything else is really, really low down the totem pole in priority, because as a community, as a neighborhood, as folks in your county, you can survive a lot together. You share information, you share resources. But then that gets to the next step. Be valuable to your community. So don't go into this thing saying, oh man, I didn't know this was going to happen. I think I've got 3 frozen burritos in my freezer and I've got some Chinese takeout. It's like, that's not going to help your community. It's not going to help you. And now you're going to become dependent and really get on everybody's nerves right out of the gate. So get some food. Go get, hey, look, bags of rice don't cost that much still. I mean, I think it's the last thing that might still be a bargain at the grocery store. So go get some of that stuff. Get some water if you don't have access to clean water, or get some ability to clean water. And then maybe a medical kit, and you know, people can make their own decisions about what they need to defend themselves. I would say that's a smart idea, but again, it's not about, you get so many people that they're new to these ideas on being prepared, and they see people in their neighborhoods who have been outright preppers or been working on this for a long time, and so they get discouraged. And they say, well, it's too late for me. It's like, no, it's not too late for you. In fact, if you just do a little bit each day, you'll actually help your own psychology out quite a bit. But you'll also be showing your community that you're trying and you want to be useful. And like you said, if you could give yourself just the ability to stay home for 2 weeks without disrupting anything, that you could pull that one off. If you could do that, it could be the difference between life and death.
You know, the power of baby steps is so often underestimated, but that's how you know, companies are built. That's how movements are. It's one step and one little thing. If tomorrow or today you go grocery shopping, just buy that one extra bag of rice and put it away, and you will have that one extra bag. One thing, baby steps, whatever you can. But General, we're both of the opinion that there is no, even as transformational as these times are, that we need not to be fearful. What is it that puts all that optimism, all that love, all that hope into your voice?
Go to your creator and have a discussion. pray, be spiritual. This is a spiritual battle. Why would you not be spiritual? This is so overwhelming to any one individual. Why let the psychology of it crush you? Find solace in the word, find solace in your creator, and you will go through this happy and in good spirits. You'll be serious because you'll know that we're in serious times, but your fellowship, so you have the vertical relationship with your creator, but then you have the horizontal relationship with your fellow man and woman. Those are the two axes that you should be on, and that will help galvanize your resilience as you go through this. You know, we have a county resilience program that we have built here in northern Idaho. We were doing it nationally, as you know, at Restore Liberty. But this is where the strongest will come from, is the people who say, not only am I going to survive this, I'm going to thrive in this. I know I'll be a different person on the other side of this thing. And I also know it's going to be a better person. And I know I'll see things that are tough, but I'm ready for that. And I'm going to trust in my creator. And then I'm going to stand by my fellow men and women, and we're going to get right through this.
Amen. Beautiful, beautiful words coming from the heart. And I know you live them as a truth. And that's what makes them so honest and inspiring. General, where can people keep up with you? Where can they connect with you and see you and read from you?
Well, I'm always at restore-liberty.org, and you could read about our County Guardian program for what we've been talking about. I'm at ksrg.org. That's the Kootenai Stability and Resilience Group, our County Guardian here locally, and you can see some of our tactics and the things that we're doing. I'm on Newsmax. You can catch me every day on either Newsmax Plus or just Newsmax 2. And I write a weekly blog at the Irascible Disruptor. But I welcome everybody's opinions, and I have lots of people that write me questions and just need a little coaching or a little help or want some examples. And at Restore Liberty, we're ready to provide that to our fellow Americans.
General, thank you so much. We put all the links in the description of this video so you can connect with General Holt. We really appreciate your time, your expertise, your wisdom. Thank you, sir, so much for coming on again, and thank you for your service.
Oh, it's always my honor. Happy Easter to you and your wonderful audience, and I love your show.
Happy Easter to you as well, and Inspire Tribe. You know we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.